Hello! Today I'm talking with Andrii Dzynia. We talked about the Russian invasion in Ukraine that started in 2014, what to do to be a real inclusive company, and about what happens when you don't give up. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone, and with me I have Andrii, or should I say Dobry Ranok, because I think you're from Ukraine, if I'm correct.
Yes, I'm Ukrainian by origin. I moved to Sweden around 9 or 10 years ago, around. So, yeah, still based in Stockholm.
And still based in Stockholm. And that's actually what I wanted to show people, that I'm here in Belgium and you moved to Stockholm. So let's move to Stockholm as well, a little bit on where we are. And Stockholm, Sweden is actually, I think at this moment, the second most location where I've been recording things at this moment. So, but let's bring you back on screen. And you're in Stockholm, so not that far away, but still not very close. And it's 16 after 10 on a Sunday morning on my time. What's the time on your side?
It's exactly the same time zone.
Exactly the same. For the people who are not from Europe, we're in the same time zone. And so Andrii, for that's how I should pronounce the name. Andrii, is this correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's old Ukrainian transliteration. So it actually changing by the time you get your foreign passport. So by the time I got mine, they had the double I transliteration. So now they do it IY or EY. So, but it's still the same name. So Andrii or Andrei, if you say Andrii, it makes sense because I went by this name for more than 10 years now. I can get used to it.
And so for the few people that don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you want people to know about you?
Yeah, sure. So I began as pretty much, I guess, typical computer science graduate, right? So I studied computer science when I was in Ukraine, in university, and worked in a number tech companies in Ukraine. So even though I never worked for local Ukrainian companies, most of my time went working for European or American clients, and that led me to my passion of building products, right? And then what I found that okay, now I've been on a part of building products. Now I want to be a part of creating product, and that's kind of what led me to Sweden 10 years ago to join Spotify, where I spent around 5 years of my life, right? So building product, learning how to build products. And since then, I moved on to other companies in different domains, right? So again, I have a computer science background, and I started actually as a tester a long time ago when I was in university, and then moved to work in software engineering in different capacities, whether it is CI/CD or it is mobile or backend to data. So I moved across different parts of the stack up until I landed into engineering leadership, right? That's where I am right now.
Mm-hmm. And you, while doing that, you moved countries as well.
Yeah, I mean, countries, that's kind of another complicated subject of my life, right? So I moved from Ukraine was 2014, right? So that's why I moved to Sweden. And then the initial goal was to come to Sweden because I'm initially confused. I thought Spotify was an American company, but turned out to be it was a Swedish company with offices in US, right? And my idea was that, okay, so we spent a few years in Sweden, see how it goes, not far away from Ukraine. It's only 2-hour flight from Kyiv, and then we at some point moved to US, to New York, where most of our friends were. New York or California, we had like discussion between the two all the time. And then eventually time came. I had the opportunity to move within Spotify internally, and I actually moved to New York and lived there for a few months. And but then we already had the first child, and we figured out that life with kids is not as fun in New York or US as it was before kids. And then we kind of decided to come back and continue living in Sweden. So yeah, I spent some time in New York for a few months. Also lived in Boston. Also tried out because some teams were in Boston as well, working on the Discover Weekly and other ML recommended playlists. And yeah, then I had another opportunity to live in Dubai, in UAE, but that also didn't work out for some external reasons. I had to spend time in Sweden supporting my family. My parents pretty much lost everything because of Russian invasion, and I had to move them out of Ukraine and settle them in Sweden, and this kind of changed all my personal plans about relocation. So yeah, here I am still in Sweden to the best of my capacity. Yeah.
But you were able to get your parents out of Ukraine.
Yeah,
and was that time 2005, 2015 or 2000?
No. They just moved.
2014?
They moved just now. So no. So I moved 2014. I've been in Sweden for all this time, and then it was like a very strange coincidence. So when the day Russia invaded, my mother, she was here with me in Sweden, and she was supposed to fly back the same day, and obviously she didn't. But then my father, he was still in Ukraine. All right, and he was under occupied territory of Russia. So because my hometown is close to Kakhovka Dam, if you heard the news where the Russia blew it off. So that's pretty much, that town was occupied by Russia in the first day, right? And he was there under occupation for more than half a year. And then when Ukraine liberated that territory before the Dnipro River, so like a Dnipro, this Kakhovka city over there, and my hometown Borislav is on the other bank of the river. So he was there under occupation, and then after that part was liberated, there was constant shelling from the Russian Russian occupied territory into that hometown. So that town was almost destroyed. Now I think it's already destroyed almost entirely, because they put like those trench bombs and cassette bombs and whatever, not caring about civilians. And what you hear in news is like only 5% what actually happens over there. And so my mom, she went over there, took him out. He didn't want to leave. He was like, had some, challenges. He was like, when you in age, it's not really easy to make, decision by your own. So so she had to come there and take him out, and then come back to Sweden as he got protection, you can say. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that whole story. Yeah. It's insane what's happening over there. Like I just said in the pre-talk, I'm working with some people who are working in Lviv right now. The stories I'm hearing almost on a daily basis, it's insane. And like you say, we hardly hear things about it in the news, and people seem to forget, because I've been to Agile in 2015, and I remember talking to multiple people there that for them it's like, no, the war started. And I hear everybody in Lviv, for them the war didn't start in 2022, it started in 2014. And it's been going on for more than 8 years. And that's what a lot of people in Europe don't understand. So I'm really happy that, I'm happy that you share this part. I'm not happy what's happening over there. But I've stated to people before, it feels like a European war that the Ukrainians are fighting. It doesn't feel like it's just your war against Russia. It feels like it's much more.
It's complicated. I mean, it's a geopolitics, right? If you want to go into that story, it will take us another 5 hours to talk. But it's geopolitics. It's not only about Ukraine and Russia. It's about US. It's about China. About European Union. It's about other countries as well. So very complicated.
Yeah, that's a little bit. And indeed, we maybe not want to go completely into that. But I do think it's important that people realize that there is more going on than sometimes we see in the news.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this already. Well, let's start with that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you and who you are?
Yeah, I mean, so this part which I already shared, so that's something people don't fully understand. A lot of this mental toll I had to go through when kind of moving to Sweden, and taking all this mental baggage with me and dealing with Russian bots and all these attacks on social media, which now, people in Europe began to experience as well. But I was living with that for 10 years now, and any Ukrainian to that matter, right?
Wow.
So, like you get your account hacked, you get your Telegram account hacked, and people like replying, basically like pretending they're you talking to your friends. There's lots of crazy stories like that, which people don't know about. But it's like all these experiences shape you into who you are as a human being, right? Because now you kind of understand that whatever you put online can be read, can be accessed. Like whatever system you use, whether it is a highly secure, protected, encrypted system, not really encrypted and protected. Right? So forget about your privacy. If you're on the internet, it's already public. Everyone will have, somebody will have direct access to the information you share on the internet, right? So you just, at some point, you just need to accept it is how it is and just figure out, okay, how can I live with what I know and how can I protect myself, my family, and people around me, right? So that's kind of one basic premise to keep in mind. And then secondly, okay, how do you find those coping mechanisms to live with this going forward, right? Because that's reality of the world we live in. It's not like, pinky and nice universe. Everyone is nice and friendly, and if you be friendly, everyone will be friendly with you, like, the golden rule. I mean, it might work, in our like IT environment where people, most people are doing well and they want to do well, but the entire world is not like that, right? So we need to deal with the human nature. And there's, of course, a lot of positives about human nature, but at the same time, yin yang, right? So there is also positives and negatives. And being a human means embodying both into one, being the whole, right? So this kind of led me a lot into psychology, into philosophy, Western, Eastern, Middle East. So like understanding different perspectives, different humans, different cultures, right? So, and all those experiences shape into who I am. And again, some of it I apply to my work, some of it I apply to my life, to my family, and most of it, again, starts with how would you live. I think you mentioned about this as a VUCA world. Okay, so for some reason my screen shut down. Give me a second.
I still hear and see you.
Yeah. My monitor locked for some reason. That's what I'm telling you. But somebody listen when you put it on the internet. I'm joking. That's probably just because of my monitor. But yeah. So like this experience has shaped me who I am. And again, there's a lot of other deeper topics go down, because if you start dealing with it, life challenges, there's a lot of mental patterns come to your brain that you need to work on case by case. And most of this comes from your childhood, like how you deal with your parents, how you deal with your schoolmates, how you deal with conflicting situations. So all that kind of bubble up and comes down to how you interact with your colleagues, your friends, and your family in daily life. And most of them, 99% of them, don't even know the deepness of struggle that you have to go through. And same as you not always appreciate the deepness of the struggle they have to go through when they interact with you, right? And so now we can go more into deeper, like into social issues across different countries, like where it is, like in US, what's happening with woke and other challenges the society going through, where it is in Sweden, where it is similar, or on a different scale, where it is you pick any other country have different social stigmas that they need to deal with, right? And when it comes to working together as a human beings, especially in the modern management, and like how modern management approach people, they typically approach people as numbers in Excel spreadsheet, assuming they're like machines who can do, wherever they want to do, right? And anyway, I think like when it comes to my mind, the way I work, I approach people from human being perspective. We all equal, right? And we all go through our own struggles and challenges. And then in order to work with people efficiently, we need to appreciate those challenges and get to the basic level of those. And then have a starting point. Okay, so we are equal, and then how we move from there, regardless of your title, regardless of your position, regardless of your background. So let's start from equal point of view and then see how we can progress from there. So that's, I think, having that realization, that was shaped me the most, right? And regardless who I talk to, am I talking to a CEO of the billion-dollar company, or am I talking to an intern, or am I talking to a student? Am I talking to a homeless person on the street? Those people are equal to me, as far as I'm concerned. So.
And did because I really like what you said earlier on about the languages, the countries, we all have our different challenges. Did the fact that you moved countries, because you came from Ukraine, you went to Sweden, you tried a little bit in a few cities in the US, did that help you get more empathy for some people from other countries, or how did that influence you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I mean, when I moved to Sweden, to be honest, I didn't know much about Sweden, right? So back then, 10 years ago, I didn't fully understand and appreciate the social complexity, right, between the countries. I was much younger. I didn't take all that systemic thinking into my mind. So I might have done a lot of, I mean, kind of cut a lot of corners in my understanding of interaction with people, right? But this eventually made a lot of mistakes, right? So I'm not going to hide that. But what happens typically in life, I mean, if you make a mistake and then you sit down, meditate on it, reflect, and then you feel, okay, so I probably said this in a wrong context, I probably did that, not appropriate, okay, but now I know, okay, what is right, what is wrong. And now I can even go deeper and understand why people expect you to behave in the ways they want you to behave, right? Because there is a certain, again, social expectation, which is preset by history, preset by social norms, by culture, by a number of different variables, right, into that. So, for example, let's maybe not pick on a specific example of a specific country, but like the way how various cultures make decisions. Like in Sweden, for example, it's very consensus-driven decision making, where in US it's more power-driven, right? So there's a boss tells you what to do, and you do it, and people okay with that, right? While in one country say okay, in other countries they're not okay, just because of different social standards. I mean, there are plenty of books written on this topic, like a culture map, culture code, wherever. So we talk about a number of them in our community, right? So, but again, it helps. Yes, it helps to work with different cultures. It also helps to move countries, all right, and not only moving them as tourists, because you don't really learn much as a tourist. I mean, even though now you have Airbnb and Culture Tip and number of services who help you to appreciate the deepness of a culture, but within 2 weeks you won't get it. I mean, you won't understand. You need to live in the country at least for a few months, a year or two, maybe 10 sometimes, to kind of being embraced fully, deeply into what that society is going through. And the more you know about that, of course, the easier, the better. And when you build innovative or technical products, if you want to really be inclusive product, not just talk about, hey, we are inclusive, blah, 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 and just make it nice marketing, but if you really want to be an inclusive company, to bring different people on board and give them enough power to make decisions, to shape the vision and strategy of the actual products that other people use, right? So walk the walk, how do they say? Talk the talk, walk the walk, right?
Yeah, I really like, and this is a little bit why I asked the question, because I see the same thing. The more that we live in yeah, and at some point, like you say, 10 years ago, you didn't realize all that stuff. Now, because you lived in a few countries, you know this much more, and you'll keep learning. And I think I don't know how it is for you, but what I see is the more you interact with people from different countries, the more you learn about it, the more indeed we realize about some of the bigger mistakes that we made earlier in our life. But yeah, it's normal, because we're grown up in a city, in a country, living also, and getting the information, like you said earlier on, from the news. We think, oh, okay, this is what's going on in this or that country, and turns out that actually there is a lot more going on. But yeah, our news channels are filtering, probably be good, because in a sense they can't show every detail from every country, but because of that we have a very limited view on the world. I didn't know that when I was growing up. I thought, okay, I've learned history. I wasn't particularly really interested in it, but I thought I knew everything about the history of the whole world, and it turns out that's completely not even true. And what I've learned is very, very, how would I say it, limited to the Belgian point of view of the history. If you, I heard stories recently about what they learned in Ukraine or Russia about the World War II, and it's completely different story as what we learned.
Yeah.
And I don't know which is the truth. It's probably somewhere a mix of both of these things, but we don't realize, at least as a younger person, I thought I understood the world. But damn, I was completely wrong there. So thanks for sharing that, because I think it's really important. A lot of times we talk about, okay, I was influenced by this or that, but this is here really about, okay, the culture that you're in a sense, and that is that's really for example, the part that you said about the bots attacking you and trying to do, I didn't even think that it was that hard for that long. That's insane.
I mean,
thanks for sharing.
you learn how to deal with all of that. Again, it all starts. We can of course go deeper into this when you start talking about the books and stuff at the end, right? But then, I mean, if you want to survive in this world, you need to really build those mental defenses, right? Same as you go to gym to exercise your body, same you need to exercise your brain every single day if you want to survive. So.
I like that. I like that viewpoint, because indeed we don't get a strong body by just doing a marathon once a year and not doing any sport for the rest of the year.
You won't be able to do marathon once a year if you don't do it.
Exactly.
you
You
just
won't
feel
even
like-
be able to, you won't be, but it's just the exact same thing with our brain. And we do think sometimes, oh, but then during the holiday I will read more and whatever. No, you need to constantly work on your brain and work on that.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. Okay, I want to move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you?
I mean, look, so when I was in school, right? So before my father brought that Pentium or whatever computer was, no, I think it was some other computer first that he brought. I wanted to be a lawyer. Is a cosmonaut, because I wanted to be a cosmonaut back then in post-Soviet Ukraine, or a lawyer. But the reason I wanted to be a lawyer was because I wanted to protect other people, right? And that's maybe because I grew up in quite a rough environment. So when I remember, it was kind of funny. So we had some kind of training session when some trainer, I don't know where they were from Sweden or UK, but they were talking about being street smart. I was like, yeah, if you grow on the street, you be in the street smart, then you can be smart in a business. And I asked them very bluntly, where are you from? Where did you live? And they're like, yeah, I lived in London. I had a nice family. I said, okay, so compare London and compare rural Ukraine, and you talk about street smarts. so that kind of
different kind of street smarts. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of tricky. Everything kind of depends on the context. So now I think something going on with my monitor once again. So it's kind of goes blank from time to time, but it's fine. So but again, I wanted to be a lawyer, right? So lawyer because I wanted to protect people, and I wanted to protect it in a legal way, because as you can imagine, like back then in post-Soviet Ukraine, lots of things was happening. I mean, law did exist, okay, but lots of things did happen beyond that. So you weren't able to protect yourself by law anyhow. Even if you wanted to protect yourself by law, you would go in jail. that was the way, right? So
wow.
Now, of course, Ukraine is changing, and lots of things, went in a good way with the jurisdictions and with the court systems. There are still lots of challenges, but getting better every year. Hope it will get much better. But back then, no, that system didn't really exist. So that my inspiration was to help build trustworthy, transparent society. That's what my mind was around back then when I was in 5th grade or 6th grade or so. So yeah, but my life take a different turn when I came to studying into computer engineering, right? Because my parents pretty much gave me the ultimatum, saying that you either go into, how did they say? Like they said something around you either go to the Kyiv, which was the capital, and you study there, or you stay home and do business with us. So because they have their own small business in our home country. So, and I said, like, okay, I want to see the world. I want to see something bigger than just our small 10,000 people town, 20,000, how much it was back then. Now it's maybe 1,000. And yeah, so I went to see Ukraine, went to see Kyiv, and then I traveled around Ukraine as well. I've been doing consultancies and trainings, and that eventually led me to move out of Ukraine because I felt like I won't be able to make an impact I wanted. So yeah, I went out.
And as a coincidence, as now it's more the opposite. Like you said, your parents asked you you could stay with us, and we're in a business. You actually moved out, and now you brought them more to the world. So that. In that sense.
Yeah, it was like, I remember there was lots of interesting discussions because I was coming back home, now and then, like every month, every half a year, I was coming back to the hometown, and we always sat down in our kitchen and talking about what's business or life or how things are developing. And then I remember saying to my parents that, hey, look, world is not very slow. World is something, wider. So, and I remember it was 2018, 19, because already feeling like it will be war. I mean, it was already kind of, I didn't, you never know, but you have this feeling that it will be more than just Donbass, right? Because Donbass was already war and going, but it was kind of in a controlled way. And you always get this feeling when you come back to home that, something doesn't feel right. I mean, it's, you get this kind of anxious feeling that, you need to do something about it. And I told to my parents that, hey, look, you need to move. They didn't want to move. And I wanted to move them to Kyiv or to Bila Tserkva, to like some cities which are closer to Kyiv, so I can fly to Kyiv and then see them within a few hours. Because for me, coming to Borislav, it was like, you need to take train overnight, and it was longer to take train from Kyiv to Borislav than to fly from Stockholm to Kyiv. So like you have to spend lots of time for that. But I mean, for them, it was, they lived most of their life in that small town and moving to a big city now. It's not as easy when in your 60s, right? So they decided.
You have your friends, and you have, especially if you have a business or anything.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, everything is around you.
Yeah,
but now they managed to create a new life in Sweden, and this is working, or how does that? Or
well, I mean, they came as refugees, right? So, I mean, what kind of life you can have as a refugee if you don't have a knowledge of a language, right? So they study Swedish, but again, it's not as easy to study new language when you're in that age, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
So that the challenges are not over. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I mean, they can leave. I mean, they want to come back home. I mean, they don't want to live here again for longer, but now they can because there is no home anymore. So you need to figure something out to do.
Yeah. That sounds bad as well. So, well, it kind of brings us to that third question about challenges. What do you consider your biggest challenge right now, or at least the biggest challenge you want to be out open on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, challenge is relative, right? So we can talk about different levels of challenges. I mean, right now I'm grateful just to be alive, right? So that's as much as far as it goes, right? And whatever challenge comes my way after this, what happened to my nation, let's say it like this, is that a challenge? I won't say that is really a challenge. I mean, as long as you maintain your mental sanity and you have a path of life, you can proceed and you don't lose your mind. You don't go, you don't just give up, right? And you keep on going. That is good enough, right? So you wake up, you go to your shower, you do your exercise, you do your meditation, you kiss your kids, you kiss your wife, and you move on with your life. That's a good enough reason to live, in my view. I mean, whatever else comes next, it's peanuts, right?
So in that sense, it sounds like your biggest challenge, like you said, more or less, is keep your sanity and keep everything together in the world or a part of your youth is falling apart, I would say, and like everything's happening there.
I mean, I had to go through existential crisis, right? So as probably many Ukrainians did over the past 2 years, right? So maybe 10 years. I mean, depends how much who was affected and when. So because it kind of comes in waves, right? So like, even though I'm not from Donbass myself, I've been in Donetsk and Lugansk. I know the cities, right? I've been there multiple times, but you never actually get a feeling of how much the war affects you up until it comes to your doorstep, right? So you're always like, it's somewhere over there, it's somebody over there. Or, yeah, I know some people who are affected, okay, but now they're safe, they're alive. So you kind of mentally, you kind of try to maintain your sanity by excluding yourself from the problem up until problem comes to your doorstep, right? Then you can't move around. You need to figure out how you live with this, right? And then you need to build those new coping mechanisms of how you want to live your life, pretty much, because it will affect any part of your life, right? If your mental sanity is not fixed, everything else just falls apart, right? So and that's why you go into like Stoicism or Taoism or wherever else mechanisms help you to deal with that, because what we go through as a society on a global scale is not new. I mean, humanity been dealing with this like every 100 years, right? So because we lived in a world where no major wars been happening, I mean, there's still wars where are going in the world. It's not like war didn't happen. There was multiple wars, proxy wars across the world, almost every single year happening. Just so Because if you personally don't feel affected, I mean, it's somewhere in that part of your country or some part of the continent, you don't put so much attention into it. But as long as it comes to you, then it's entirely different feeling, and then emotionally you need to deal with that, right? And that I think I would say that is mentally the biggest challenge. And then wherever else, like, hey, now I have the situation, I need to, figure out my P&L. Okay, just sit, like, calculate your Excel sheets, and you're done. Oh, I need to build this product. My boss came and tell me I need to deliver this by tomorrow. Okay, all right. So let's make a step back. Let's talk about slicing, timelines, manage expectations. Boom, boom, done. I mean, those are not challenges anymore, right? Because if you have something more deeper that you're going through, and all that is personal, right? So for me, it's dealing with, this war stigma. For other people might be like, somebody got a child or somebody had another unfortunate event in their family. So somebody might get, I don't know, like wherever is stress, right? So typically challenge come from the stress that person needs to deal with. And each person has different stress levels. And based on that level, you would say, this is challenging, this is not challenging. But for me, that's my situation, what is challenging for me now, which is something outside of my control. I can't control that situation. I can only deal with this.
Yeah, thanks. There's so many layers in everything you say, but I really like you say, it's close to our doorstep. We have been wars going on. Yeah, war never stopped. Some people think, but the World War II it's 80 years ago, and it's like, no, actually there've been wars all around the world for years. But it looks very distant. This comes closer to people in Europe because it's like, what is it? It's less. It's about 2,000 kilometers from my door. That Kiev is 2,150 or something, if I remember correctly. So it's really close. Because and I've been there. I've been in the city, so I've seen some pictures from things that I think I visited. It sounds close, but at the same time, like you say, I don't realize what that means. I heard stories from people that had to take trains and bus rides for more than 30 hours just to get to a doctor's appointment because whatever, and it sounds insane to everybody in Belgium. And these are just the side effects and everything else. I have a person who said, okay, my neighbor's apartment completely was blown away, and this person came to work because he didn't want to look out of the windows. His windows were broken because of the missile attack, and he didn't want to look up to that, so he came to work. And I'm like, I understand, and at the same time, how could you? I don't know how I could have dealt myself, and of course it's happening a little bit, but like you say, at that moment, who cares about who put out the garbage today or whatever? You care about much deeper existential problems. And that second part of that question was, is there a good part? Why is that a good thing for you? Are there, with the whole situation, everything you learned about that, is there long-term something that is good for you, or is that so hard that there is actually only negative parts of this?
I mean, classical saying, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So you learn how to live.
But is that really true? Because I've said that myself before. But in a situation like the war, I'm really wondering, like, the people I'm working with, does that make them stronger, surviving day after? I don't know. It's really a question.
Again, I'm in very privileged situation, right? I'm not in Ukraine, right? So you would probably need to ask somebody who is not even in Lviv, but somebody in Kryvyi Rih, I mean, Odessa, Kherson, Zaporizhia. So those very close to the Russian front lines, right? So, and people sit and work over there. I mean, Kyiv, yes, affected as well, but they have much stronger defense systems than in other regions, right? Because it's a capital, right? So, and people find a way to live and work, and people earn money. They need to spend on, and they educate their children. Kids go to school, kindergartens, at risk of being killed every single day, right? So comparing my situation and their situation, it's not even comparable, right? So because I might be mentally worried about my friends, my family who is still in Ukraine, but they are there, all right? That's its entirely different emotional struggle you need to go through. And how does it help me? As I told you, like defense mechanism, building resilience, understanding there is nothing you can do about it. So like, in psychology, if you have a situation when it's totally out of your control, the best question you can ask, okay, what can I do to maintain my sanity? Because I can change that external situation. It's just out of my control. I can only protect me, my family, and people around me and maintain good sanity, right? But in my case, I at least know that physically my family will be okay, at least for now, unless escalation happens globally, right? Which I also need to account for, right? In premeditated malware, what worse can happen. And but in Ukraine, it's even more dangerous, right? So you hear a siren, you need to go in a basement. If you don't, you take your own risk. Many people don't even go to basement when they hear sirens this day, because they're like, yeah, it's just another siren and it will be fine. But then, no, what if not? And for many people, it's not. Like in Chernihiv, like what 2 days ago, 1 day ago, 5 people died, right? Like just like that,
Yeah.
just being on the street, just walking around the main square.
Yeah, I've heard that also from some colleagues, that they say, well, some people don't care about the sirens anymore. There is a very good app that warns people about missiles. Well, I don't know how good it is, but it warns people about missiles, and some people even deinstall it because they're like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. But at the same time, like you say, that risk stays there. And yeah, it's not because you don't want to hear about the risk that the risk isn't there, but at the same time, I can imagine for sanity, some people maybe don't want to think too much about it.
That's defense. That's again another defense mechanism, right? So you can have defense mechanism as I have something I can do. I think I lost you. Are you here?
I'm still there.
Okay,
I don't know
okay.
what's happening. I'm going to try to get my camera back. So it looks like we have challenges there.
Yeah, so when you talk about those things, somebody is listening.
My camera should come back any minute. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. So again, those defense mechanisms are different per person. Some people just ignore what is happening. They're like, yeah, I just go on with my life. Where it happens, I will die anyway. And that's what many people told me. Like, if I go to basement, if not today, then tomorrow another rocket will shoot me anyway. So why would I care? So people just like be totally ignorant of their lives because they already kind of accepted the death. Right, like I can die any day, so why bother? That's how they live most people how they live in Ukraine. And the most interesting, and also something I not fully understand yet, but there are many people who moved out of Ukraine, settled as refugees, whether it's Poland or Belgium or France, Germany, Sweden, across Europe, and they came back to Ukraine. They said, like, this doesn't fit us, right? So we want to come back home, knowing that they will be dead anytime, any moment, and they still want to.
I have some colleagues that moved back indeed from Poland to Lviv, for example, because they said, I also want to support my country, and if I live in another country, first of all, it's the moral support, but it's also the money support. If I live in another country, I pay taxes in another country, and I feel my country needs the taxes much more. They want to support the army in whatever way, and so yeah, it's. I have a duality, like I understand and I don't understand, because okay, yes, you support your country at the same time. If the risk is dying, how do you support your country there? But I do have a lot of respect for these decisions, because it's really like, okay, yeah, nationalism, I'm always afraid of that, but this is for me the kind of positive nationalism, is people really like, okay, they're under attack, it's not their choice, and they really say, this is my country, I want to
it's not nationalist. At least maybe for some people it is, but again, for majority, it's not about like loving Ukraine as it is. No, they're coming back then to support other people who stayed.
Right. Yeah. The word nationalism was not right selected. You're correct. That's
it's more like tribal responsibility. If if you go very deep into epistemology, I don't remember the branch of the science who deal with these questions, but it's more about we have people who decided to stay, and if you move out of a tribe, you feel like you're
You're
obligated to
abandoned
come back. Yeah, you just mentally can't because you belong to that place. It's not about nationalism at all. It's much deeper than that.
Thanks for clarifying that, because that would have not been correct to these people. So, but yeah, I do have that feeling when I have these conversations with these colleagues. I have a deep respect for these decisions, because I know also from a few friends that I have, and then more in Kiev than in Lviv, but that told me, I think a year or two ago, about how difficult it was. And when the war started, really some of these discussions that they had. I have my camera going off again. But yeah, these are the kind of things. Let's move to that next question. What drives you at this point? Because there is a lot of passion. You had a lot of these things. What is there from drive? Where is that passion coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a fixer, right? I like fixing what is broken, and what drives me nuts is that I can fix something which is broken. like in this situation with Russian invasion, I can do anything about it. Like I'm as any other person. Like we are stuck, right? And then like this drains my energy, and I try to find other means of motivation. Or what can I do to push through it, right? So then I find motivation through, let's say, I know I can walk around the street and see like, okay, this light is not doing well. So I take my phone, I send email to authority who deals with commune electricity or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, thank you for reporting. We'll fix it in the next 2-3 months, where when they have time.
Wow, does it take that long? And I love the example, because we have exactly a similar kind of app here in Belgium, and I get annoyed if it takes more than a week or two to fix it. If it's in other countries, takes a few months. That's even worse.
Yeah, because I know how it's in Belgium or during summer, but Sweden shuts down for summer, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. There is. It's not the full summer, but indeed there is definitely parts that are working at a different pace. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the example, because immediately I had a flash. We have a very small, I wouldn't even call it a road, a very small path next to our house, between our house and our neighbors. And there was one light to lighten it up, because it's a very dark thing. But that light had been flickering a couple of weeks ago, and it was really annoying because it was right next to our bedroom. And so it was very, very annoying. And actually it did from a very early hour, like 16 hours or 17 hours, so way too early to have it on the weekend. So yeah, but it was fixed after a couple of weeks. But it was what I liked about that, and I want to point it back to what you said earlier on about community and everything. Is like, okay, we have now some tools to actually tell other people that are in cities. Yeah, before, without the app, I wouldn't even know who to talk to. I wouldn't even know where to ask it for, let alone if I wanted to take the time to go to the city and to say, look, there is a problem. Now I can just take out my phone and take 5 to 10 minutes, and at least I warn them.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that,
and here's another challenge. That's where most people stop. Okay, you report it, and you're like, I did my part. I go along with my life, and I don't stop there. Because I can give you another more complex example, right? So we lived in another part of town a few years ago. When we moved, we bought an apartment, blah blah blah. We moved over there, and then we figure out that there's something happened on the transportation network in Stockholm. So they started routing more cars to our street. Okay, because they started seeing they put that street as a major link between the highway and another regional street, right? So then suddenly, right after we bought, like a few months after we bought an apartment, the traffic increased 5x, 10x across the street.
Wow.
When I talk to my neighbors, like they say, like, no, never been like that. Like the police, like blue light cars, never went through the street. Now they always constantly passing by because it became much more convenient, right? So, and when people are like, yeah, why did you buy this apartment? Why do you complain? It's like, yeah, because when we bought it, it wasn't a problem. Now it is, right? So that's why I complain. And so what I did, I started, like, as you said, like, reach out to, like, send an email or use an app. I don't remember, it was like 8 years ago. and you get like a template response. Thank you for your report. You have ID, blah, blah, blah. We will look into it. And then what happened, I had nothing happened like 1 month since. Okay, nobody came back. So what do? Like, you can wait? No. I made the phone call. Okay, I have this ID. Are you doing anything? Like, oh, we've been busy. Nobody been assigned to your case yet. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, okay, fine. So what is the next step in this procedure? You need to get somebody assigned. Okay, how can we get somebody assigned? You need to wait. I say, okay, how long? So it might feel
you keep pushing, so you're actually being kind of a scrum master of this process in a way, or of your ticket.
And here's where we disagree again. So I don't believe it's a scrum master job to do this. I believe it's any personal responsibility to do this, because in this case, like, forget about Scrum and Agile, but think of it as me as a citizen or back then resident of the country. I pay taxes, right? And not small taxes, quite high taxes. So what am I getting back in return? Of course, medical support, police, all that given. Okay, but then if I have another problem, what is the process handling that problem, right? There needs to be like SLAs, there needs to be, some priorities. If somebody would tell me, hey, Andrii, your request is not really high priority, we have like 1,000 other requests I need to deal with, okay, fine, got it, all right, so makes sense. Nobody told me so. They told me, like, we're waiting for officer to be assigned. So they said, okay, so get that person assigned. So how can I fix that problem? Officer not being assigned to my case. Okay, so let's move on. So it kind of led me to deeper and deeper, to the point when they actually put measures to reduce speed limit and put some bumps on the road. But that happened just 1 year ago, after we already moved out of that place to another place. It was like long back and forth. They've been measuring like the decibel, like a noise in my apartment, and blah blah blah. And then I've been making a number of cases. I even tried to go to court, but it was quite complex because you need to go against the community. And I said, like, hey, I don't want to go against the community. That's not my intent. My intent is to fix the road, and this we do together with the community. So it doesn't make any sense to go into court with this case, right? So. But yeah, it was lots of fun discussion like that. But then back to your point about Scrum Master, that's in this kind of human social dynamic, the moment you appoint a Scrum Master to the team, everyone is like, oh, okay, cool. Now I can relax. It's not my problem anymore, right? It's a Scrum Master problem. Same as if you introduce a tester into the team. Oh, quality and testing, not my problem as a developer anymore. It's a QA problem, right?
No, well, yeah, I kind of a little bit on purpose, and so I decided to say that I really have a big problem with my camera. I'll fix it again. I'll first finish what I'm saying. I kind of did it on purpose to talk about the Scrum Master, because indeed I feel, for me, a Scrum Master is more like we show it, we can solve some of that, but yeah, in reality you want everyone. And for me, if a Scrum Master does it, it's more like setting an example. This is how you do it, and at some point a team should be able to do these kind of things on their own. I loved your example about QA, because indeed QA for me is not the persons that are solving the quality. You can't add quality in at the end. It's more like the QA is at best is the wrong word, but this is the kind of the person showing the mirror. This is where we are, and yeah. That's
I mean, best teams I work at and teams I build personally, I don't have QAs and I don't have Scrum Master on the team. Okay, so we have developers, we have designers, we sometimes might have a PM. It's also not always necessary, but we do have strong engineers and strong engineering leaders who can take product from 0 to 1 and keep on scaling this. Then with time, you might want to add a Scrum Master, or you might want to add a coach or test engineer to bring additional perspective, again, to debias yourself. But again, I came back to XP, extreme programming paradigm, which I think is a fundamental to building any technical product, right? You need to hire strong engineers. Even if you hire, somebody out of school, you embed them into the process from day one, and they pick up from more senior folks quite soon, right? That's how you build great teams and build software. And then you can add coaches, you can add additional skills, consultants. Maybe it's not, sometimes it is enough to bring what is a gap in your particular team in this particular moment, right? And that typically gets fixed within months and two, and then that person being embedded into the team becomes another developer, contributes same as others, but not just, I'm here to do like retrospective for you. Okay, fine. Just teach us how to do it. We'll do it ourselves, and go do something better, right? So there's plenty of other people to be coached on the C level, typically, right?
I really like your perspective there, and I think it comes back to, or it feels at least very linked to the whole discussion that sometimes people think that Agile is about Scrum, where actually when I started, and I have the feeling when you started as well, is that in the beginning it was much more about technical excellence, technical practices, like everything extreme programming. And when I talk to the people who created Scrum in these beginning days, they literally said, we don't talk about the technical stuff because that's dealt with in extreme programming, and the combination is so powerful. Somehow our community seem to, or a lot of people in the community have lost that idea that you need the technical excellence, but you can't do anything, for me at least, and I feel we're in alignment there, is that you can't do really good agile without all the technical excellence. You need all that good quality, and then maybe everything else can help on top of that. Otherwise, I think there's a big risk of burnout and a big risk of a lot of other stuff. So that thank you for bringing that perspective, because I think we need to look much more at these kind of things. And it kind of brings me in a way to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement? Because you talked about teams that you created, and you talked about other kind of things. You talked a little bit about Spotify. I think you did something at King and a few other companies. But what do you consider for yourself? And it could be personal, it could be professional. What do you consider your biggest achievement so far?
Yeah, I guess professional. What I like doing is changing people's perception of reality. Right, is to help them see how else can you do things in more efficient way. Right, and I began doing that when I was a tester on the second grade of university, and I'm doing that now when I manage teams of 100+ people. Right, so regardless what I do, it's still the same type of work. It's helping people understand how else can you do stuff. Right, and it's like, for example, I had a discussion with the CFO about how we do yearly budgeting. I said, like, okay, so why do we need to lock a budget for a year? Why can't we do it on quarterly, on monthly, on daily, on hourly basis? Tesla does it on every minute basis. You come to Tesla company, and I haven't been a Tesla, but that's based on some people sharing on the internet, right? So they have like agile or whatever. Agile is overused term right now, right? So, but they have like a flexible budget allocation. Say like, hey, you need to have the spare parts, go get them. Don't wait for approval for the contract to be signed. Just go get them because you need them, right? So that's what agile is. It's responding to change rather than following the plan. Again, agile is like what? It's like a few folks having ski resort fun, signing few principles. That's what agile is. I mean, don't make Cogger cult around it. I mean, it's a set of principles that somebody agreed on, who seem appropriate. What, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Is it still appropriate now in modern way how we build software? Or are we talking about modern agile, just from, I think, Joshua, right, who invented the modern agile? Or are we talking about building products? Are we talking about building great design like Airbnb? Brian Chesky, founder, talks about these days. So do we even need product managers, or is it product marketing managers is enough? I mean, there's so many different ways to do software development, or building companies, or building great products. You can go even deeper than that, right? So, or you can say, like, what can we do to create economical value in the world? Because now the economy globally is struggling, right? So how can we make it recover and grow again, right? And it's not about how to write code. It's not about processes. It's about solving the problem or addressing the challenge, and helping people understand that. That, I would say, is the biggest challenge, and maybe the biggest achievement I've done so far. The people I work with, they do understand this when we speak, right? So I help them see the bigger picture, like the entire system, not only like your box or the context where you are, but see the entire thing.
And in that sense, I think Agile, you talked about, I think you meant 20 years ago, the Agile Manifesto, which is indeed about 22 years ago, if I remember correctly, something like that. That was a lot about software. And what you're saying is we're actually seeing much bigger systems because, yeah, the whole system thinking that has been embedded for me in agile for a very long time. We look at it from multiple kind of perspectives. We always had in the agile manifesto also the thing that, okay, we talk with businesses or customers, we talk with developers, a lot of collaboration is there already, but it was really very software focused. And what I'm hearing you say is that for you it's much bigger. It's, yeah, you talked earlier about working with C-level kind of people that need to understand it, because otherwise we're, optimizing a team where the rest of the company is not looking at that doesn't help anyone. It actually creates much more frustration at all sides, I would say. So you were working, what I'm hearing is that without looking at a specific example, you talk mostly about, okay, helping people understand much more of that bigger picture. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, not even starting with the C-level. I think C-level, those are typically operational people, right? Everything starts with who owns the business, okay? Because at the end of the day, CEO is a person doing the job and reporting to the board, okay? And the board is typically who? Is a founder, owner of the business, investors into the business, maybe some advisors who don't really make any decision, but advise to different means. And that's why main decisions are done. Decisions are done on that level. I mean, you can go even wider, talk about economy and governments, like in China, for example. Board doesn't have any authority, and government has all the authority, right? It's also kind of country context specific on country level. But
thanks for bringing that up, because indeed we don't always think about that kind of level, because that is another way of culture that is completely different. That's really important.
But like in our world, like in Western world where we live, at least we have some autonomy to make decisions based on the board level, at least. And then as a founder of a company, for you, it's critically important is to, first of all, look into dilution, not to dilute yourself too much, so you lose total control over the company to the people who give you money, right? And then, but typically by Series B, you don't have a control. So founding team typically lose control by Series B because based of amount of investments you bring to the company, like 10%, 20%, 30%, and also counting for ESOPs and founder equity. By Series B, typically companies lose control, and by Series A, sometimes depends how good you are with negotiations. So yeah, and then like whoever you hire, like a CTO, CPO, CMO, COO, all those people will be just doing the job which board decide you to do. So yeah, and I mean there are different dynamics on different boards. Some boards are more hands-on, some less hands-on. So some gives more power to executive team, some less. So it's also like context specific. But again, like that's how I learned about this stuff, because when I come to C-level folks and talk about addressing those systemic challenges, they like, hey, Andrew, it's not we who decide. We're just being told what to do on the board meeting. It's like, okay, cool, fine. How do we fix that? Like, yeah, go talk to investor, and okay, and good luck with that, right?
Yeah. Sorry, my at this point my camera is still off. I can't get it to work. It seems to be overheated somehow. But
intense conversation.
It's probably something like that, which is very. I had it before, but then it was like after a full day of work, and this is like, okay, this is on like about an hour. Anyway, I'm really glad that you brought that up. That indeed most people, when you look into a team, they're like, yeah, but my boss doesn't understand me and blah blah blah, and they always forget that most bosses have another boss and have another boss. And if it could be indeed, and even at C-level there is a board, and like I loved your example about, okay, the board still has to follow the rules of the government and other things, and depending on which country you are, you have more flexibility on some of that stuff, but there still are rules and whatever. You can't just we're living in a world where we have laws and everything, so even there, and like you say, we can challenge some of that stuff. We can go and find out the rules, like your example with the what's happening in your street. You can go around and you can say, okay, how can we deal with it? What can I do? And that's very nice, because it shows also that even if there are bosses, even if there are rules, there is always ways to understand, okay, and maybe can we give the full perspective of everybody? Maybe we can find out what are the wiggle ways. And I'm not talking about ignoring the rules, but more like, okay, do we understand each other's challenges? And maybe there are solutions, because that's what I hear you say do a lot. You make sure that people understand the whole picture of everything. Is that correct way of putting it?
I saw this way, you, but honestly, most people on that level, they don't care about challenges. You know what they care about?
No, tell me.
Money.
Mm.
All they care about. Can you make money? Yes or no? If you can, yes. If you can make money, we are talking. If you only talk about solving challenges, nobody cares about those. So and then you come to another challenge, is how you connect the challenge in a monetary sense, right? So you can solve the problem, whatever problem you see on a society on a different level, so you actually can make money from that problem as well. And now we're talking, right? Now you can get investment, you can get seed funding, or Series A, convertibles, debt notes, whatever. So there are different ways to get money, okay? But you need to have a value proposition. So how would this problem you're addressing helps create economical prosperity, or helps to generate more money? If you connect those two, then you're in the business. If not, then it's just a hobby project, so nobody will fund it.
I like that you point out the hobby project, but yeah, and indeed, money is in many cases a very important part of it. I do think sometimes people create a company with solving a bigger idea, but money is always involved in whatever it's happened. Even if it's just keeping the company afloat to achieve that bigger idea, you still need money. It's like you say, without money, it's a hobby project. No matter how much energy and no matter how many people you put in, yeah, money is always involved in whatever way. So that is an important part as well. But that's again going back to the systemic point of view and looking at what drives which people, which part could we connect. So I was lucky to sometimes also work with C-level people who had a broader view, not just the money part, but money was always involved. It was not that you could say, okay, we just don't care only about that and we ignore the money. No, at least you need to pay the people. At least if you want to create something, if it's software, it's hardware. You talked about Tesla. Well, there was also an idea about, okay, how could we change the world to go much more electric cars and everything, and there is money involved. So it's very interesting to look at all these kind of things. I want to move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip that you want to share?
Again, agility is overused term, right? So let's just remove agility from a question and say what tip you would want to share, right? So and then I think let's maybe pick on one example, right? So pick on flow. I know if you know the concept of flow from there are a few books written on it, so it's easy to search. But the key concept which I embrace in my life, that you always stay in a flow of being productive, right? And that productivity doesn't mean that you generate lots of output for the same amount of time, but productivity as holistic measure of your health, your mental sanity, your output, your outcome which you generate, and also long-term sustainability, right? So you need to find that kind of sweet spot for yourself, like how much time you dedicate to your kids, how much time you dedicate to your family, how much time you dedicate to sleep every day, how much time you dedicate for eating. All that has compounding effect, whether positive or negative, right? If one area of your life is suffering, you move out of flow very quickly. Then suddenly things start falling apart, right? You need to always find a way how you come back in motion, right? And that starts with you keeping your balance and maintaining, first of all, your mental sanity, but there is much more. There's a few other components, like your physical health, your soul, right, and your health overall. So.
I really like that you point that out, and I think when you mention flow here, I think you more mean the flow from the not so much the flow I think that is used in a Kanban way, but more the psychological flow that Mihaly, how does it called again?
Kerievsky, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's the kind of flow I think you're talking about. Am I correct? Or
yes, from psychological perspective, right? So because our brain are wired in a certain way, you need to find the optimal experience to maintain the feeling of present moment, right? So same as you know, if you meditate or if you go into deep trance state, and there are different ways to go into that state, right? So that's kind of the mental state you want to maintain every single second to feel joy in a present moment where you do, because if you don't, then your brain start going into other possible combination, what can happen, what can't happen, and that's not far away from anxiety and stress disorder. So maintaining this flow, that's also coming back to the previous questions of how to survive, bot attacks and psychological pressure, right? So if you are in the flow, nothing else really matters. Only present moment matters. That's all you think about.
But at the same time, it's sometimes hard to get in the flow, and it's very easy is maybe the wrong word, but if we're not conscious about it, it could happen really that we're very quickly out of that flow, that people get us out of that flow because something's happening in our world. And before I read that book, I didn't really think a lot about the flow. And if I look back, for example, when I was very young, if I would start reading a book, I would be in a flow that was almost impossible to interrupt me. People would talk to me, would ask me things for, I don't know, my mother, if I needed to go for dinner or whatever. I just didn't hear it because I was so in the flow. When I'm at work, I've actually seen that it's in the beginning years, it was very easy to get me out of a flow and to get me to focus on something else, where actually that was also important. And that mental state that links to that is so important there. So do you have any tips and tricks for people to work on that, to stay in such a flow?
I mean, first of all, read the book by Mihaly. I try to pronounce his last name. Csikszentmihalyi. It's right.
I'll link the book to the to later on in it as well here. But yeah.
So starting with that is a good starting point, but then again, kind of going deeper into how brain works, like the brain science, neuroscience, right? Understanding like the pathways, the components of the brain, how your brain makes decision based on in what context, and what affects your decision making. How your decision making can be easily manipulated by social media, by news, by wherever. Right? It's because especially how to deal with propaganda and all those kind of things, right? And that propaganda exists not only in Russia, as many people say, it exists in other countries as well. So because again, don't forget social stigma and social norms. And because try posting something which a government will disagree with in Belgium, and see how many hours it will take to take them down, right? So that information. So it exists in any country. When you form, just so it's called not propaganda, it's called social norms, right? That's that do different ways of that. But again, I need to be very sensitive with this because those words mean different things in different contexts, right? So I will just say that we need to use a terminology or when we label certain things, right? So because now the propaganda is being labeled to regimes, right? So we kind of keep it like that, and then what is happening in the Western world, we call it within the social construct, the social context, right? Because of course there is a lot of things which doesn't make any sense to say or would be appropriate. So then you kind of, in a free society, you take a risk based on what are you fighting for, right? So for example, when you talk about agile, so we will safely go and challenge some premises of agile, right? Saying okay, so is agile is a methodology, or is agile is a philosophy, or is agile is a way of life, right? So let's have that discussion, have unification. Is it only about software development, or is it also about how you build the business, right? Because now it's evolved, went wider, right? So it always needs to be framed in a certain context, because words and titles and labels, they do matter, right? And you need to be very clear, crystal clear of what you mean about certain label in a certain context, because it can be easily misinterpreted and somebody can just cut, hey, Andrii said this in this talk for this 5 seconds, put it on TikTok, and then I have a problem I need to solve, right? So
yeah, I think that, well, what I think I said that 2 days ago or something like that, that what the kind of problems we see with the social media is the similar kind of things that famous people used to have years ago, and then it was just about the famous people, but now everyone has it. You say something in a cafe, and I just happened to record it, and for whatever reason I was maybe recording someone else, but in the eye of the camera we see you doing something, and it's out, and then I put a little bit editing, and to make things worse with AI, we could actually make things fake things, so that's even a lot worse. And all of a sudden we have problems for something that was completely taken out of context, maybe didn't even happen, maybe was actually you repeating what someone else said, but then edited in a way that it looks like you say it, and all these kind of things. And that was a big problem for famous people for many years, but now because of cameras and smartphones and social media, it's a problem for everyone. And yeah,
because it's a manipulation of the masses, and now manipulation moved from news outlet into social media, because that's where people spend their attention, right? Remember, everyone competes for your attention, right? So and wherever your attention goes, that's where the money is.
That's another very nice. Yeah, that's indeed where our attention is the money is. That's a very important thing as well. And again, we're looking at system thinking, and money is involved in many of these things. That kind of thing. So thanks for bringing that tip and talking. And I really like, indeed. I've been this show is called Who's Agile more for historical reasons, but it's indeed about bringing people back with that spirit, with that mindset. There is a reason why that the agile that you see here on top, just on top of me, has a little A and not a big capital A, because for me it's more about the thing and not about the branding and everything. And I like that we bring it back to the core essence of what we want to do. I want to move to that next question. And you've been talking about moving countries. You've been talking about working in Spotify. I know that Spotify for a very long time was focused on working very physically and not so much on remoting. They really wanted to have teams together. So I wonder, did you have any experience working remote before COVID, for example?
When I was in Ukraine, yes, as I mentioned to you, when I was working for European American clients, so most of that was kind of remote interaction with people overseas, but then also we had our local team right within the office, which most interactions have happened. And then same at Spotify as well, right? So some team members were in New York or in California or in other places. We also had to interact with them remotely. But it was more like, in office culture, but yeah, you have some meetings online, right? That's how far remote went, right? But then when COVID came, yeah, that's kind of became the full remote capacity, and I still work like that since then. So I didn't come back to the office, because most companies I work were remote companies. And what I learned about remote working, I think you still miss that connection, human to human. Like, people don't want to turn on cameras sometimes, and then you kind of show them by example. Like if a manager turns on the cameras, and everyone feels like obligated to turn on their cameras as well to make the conversation easier. So, but then you put more pressure on yourself as a leader to show an example and lead by example in that case. But this dynamic change very quickly, right? Let's say a few people start doing this, and most people start doing it as well, so it kind of helps the compounding effect. But over time, I still was in favor of meeting people. So even though I worked with the company who was based in Dubai with offices in Cairo, so I went in Cairo to meet people physically. So I have the personal connection, and so we meet each other, share food together, because for people in those parts of the world, sharing food is a part of a culture, and it's very important for them to build up these bonds with people, or the table. I mean, even in Europe, I think it's still quite important, but it's less emphasis on that. But still, sharing food is like one of those cultural aspects. I think regardless of the culture, it's how you make most of your bonds is by sharing food together.
And I remember when I visited the offices of Spotify, it was there was a lot of emphasis on Fika, so not just food, but also having coffee or something to drink, in a way. Is that also part of that, or do you see it a lot different when there is food involved?
So Fika is different, right? So in Sweden you have like what in the world people say Swedish table, but nobody in Sweden say it like that, like a buffet, right? So smorgasbord, right? It's a Swedish word. So when you have like a shared food, and that typically for lunch or dinner. So if you go like to a Swedish restaurant, you pay like 100 krona to enter the restaurant, and then you just get how much food you want to eat, right? So that's quite common. But then Fika is a little bit different. So Fika is more like traditional social break. It's not even like coffee or buns, as many people say. It's more like, expats who come and say like, hey, it's like a coffee break. I was like, not really. Yes, you drink coffee, but some people would prefer tea or water. So kind of very personal, individual. But the goal is to have social interaction and break down the kind of social barriers, because in Swedish society is quite flat, especially in the work environment. So like your CEO, your C-level would come to a Fika as would any entry-level employee would, right? And they can have a chat on the human-to-human level, right, as we discussed before. Which, I mean, personally, like myself, I'm not being like a native Swede or anything. Like I came to this country as a guest, right, and just spent here like 10 years. So I could see like a positives, like upsides and downsides of this dynamic, because it also might create perceptions of what is in there, but it's not actually there. Like you kind of build a bond with your boss, and then you can, hey, now we kind of had Fika together, but it doesn't mean anything really. It's just Fika, right? But for some people, it might mean like, oh, okay, because I already have the social connection with my boss, now I can, whatever, ask for a rise or ask for promotion. Some people came to me with that type of attitude, and yeah.
So they make more out of it than what you think it is.
Yeah,
That's what I'm hearing.
it's mainly for people who came to Sweden as expats, right? So because you still need to learn the social norms through experience, through examples, and again, depends on the personality of a person. Sometimes, as I said you much earlier, sometimes the people might make, and I did make some of the mistakes, not like in this context, but in a different example. That's you kind of get the feeling that okay, because everyone is on the same level and you talk equally. So now we can talk equally when we have one-to-ones or any other meetings, right? But Swiss maintain very strict professional etiquette. Like, so Fika is Fika, but now you do work, and Fika doesn't really apply. All right, if you see what I mean there. So you still need to maintain professional lines. That now you don't behave like friends to friends. You still need to behave professional to professional, even though you had friendly discussion over Fika like an hour ago.
Right, so that's a different kind of thing. But that's a little bit why I asked for, because many people see similar kind of things with food. So then they say, okay, you can go out and have a friendly dinner with maybe, well, I'm not sure with the boss, because that would be a lot of food for the boss, but maybe with many different colleagues, like you say, that's its connection. Is there for you now from, and that I'm explicitly asking you because you're an outsider, do you see other similarities or differences there?
I mean, it's not easy to answer because again, there are complexities within specific cultures, but there's also like complexity, as I told you, like social complexity of a group, and there's individual complexity of the personality of individual, right? So perception of that individual against the group and against another individual, right? So not against, but within, probably better to say. So, for example, but then if you could compare the Swedish culture and I know Middle Eastern, generalizing because there are different cultures within Middle East as well. But let's say like let's speak Egypt because I work with Egypt, right? So there is more, not friendliness, but there is more casuality in typical Egyptian work environment, at least to those companies I used to work with. I didn't work with many, only work with few, right? So, but my perception was that there is more, it's more casual than even Swedish culture, which is also quite flat, right? But then when it comes to decision making, it's more hierarchical than in Sweden. So Swedish decision making is more like, circle consensus driven, even though management don't expect everybody to align with the management strategy or way of doing things, but they want to give people not space to wane, but more like a space to speak about open issue, right? So, but that doesn't necessarily mean like management will decide how people say. It's not always the case. There's also, again, another perception that people are like, oh, they want to listen to us, they want to see how we feel. In some companies, it is the case. In other companies, it's really not. It's just a social norm that leadership feels obligated just to let people speak, not to have people walking out the door by the end of bonus payouts, right? So it's very case by case. Where in Arabic countries, it's more like you get like this more like personal touch to things. Like, hey, it's like because you're sharing food is more intimate because you kind of sit on the floor and you kind of eat by your bare hands. So it's more intimate connection than just drinking coffee and eating kanal bule, but at the end of the day, it's still the same human to human relationship, right? So there's still the boss can't make a decision attending to one individual and also can't make a decision for the group against the company objectives or company needs. So it's kind of still like, business wise, it's the same, just so the dynamic is changing based on previous I would say like deepness of previous interaction when it comes human to human, right? So if the relationship goes to be deeper than if it goes to be deeper, then the social complexity and the constructs that you need to handle in communication also needs to go deeper. So, for example, when you see like a company-wide message in a Egyptian company, it will go really, really deep towards like why we do this, why we made that decision, explaining like breaking it down to not individual level, but breaking it down to like I don't want to go like into soul and that discussion, but it feels more deeper personal than it was for me in a Swedish company, right? So Swedish culture maintains more boundaries than that Egyptian company I used to work with. But again, that may be subjective to those two companies I used to work, so it might not apply to all Swedish companies or all Egyptian companies, because Spotify is not, again, a typical Swedish company. At least it wasn't a typical Swedish company. Now it's kind of became one of big enterprise companies, like, tragedy of commons, as I used to say.
But I like that I want to stress that little part of, because I had a similar kind of discussion recently also with some friends and family. It's like country culture is important, but we shouldn't forget that the company culture is in most cases much more important than the company than the country cultures, because somehow it grew. And like you say, once a company grows a certain size, there comes a new kind of, it attracts other kind of people and it creates another kind of culture, which is again different. And of course, if you have work in international cultures, then it's again people from multiple countries that are different kind of things. It's a very interesting sidetrack that we went off from remote, which I really loved. So thank you for that. But I wasn't expecting it at this case. Which is exactly why I love these kind of conversations when we sidetrack. Is there anything particular about remote that you still want to add about? You've learned something about remote work since COVID. You talked that you still like the physical contact with people, the physical interaction. If you can't have that, is there any tip or anything that you say, oh, I've learned this and this is really good to help out with remote connection?
Building company 0 to 1 is very hard remote. It's much harder because the speed that you need to move with when you want to create something new from scratch is much quicker when you have everybody in one place. Right. That's, I would say, like.
So in that sense, I'm hearing also when you create these kind of things, bring people together as a way to speed up things or to help out, create a culture. Am I hearing this correct, or am I seeing things that?
No, I mean, again, just stress the context different, because if you're a big company and you assume that by bringing 1,000 people in the office, it will make things go faster, I would doubt that it was the case. You might get like, some quick ramp up and kind of, maybe a feeling of speed, because everyone will be busy, but busy doesn't mean productive, right? So.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Busy doesn't mean productive. we can have again a talk for 5 hours about that, but it's just, I think this is the basic. Well, for me, it's one of the concepts of agile as well, to show people that it's not about being busy. It's not about the 8 hours. It's about what do you produce, what's the This is again the outcome versus output discussion as well, I would say. It's brings us to a whole different kind of level. I want to move to that next question because I know, or I feel at least, that you have a few other things that you would be interested in talking about, and that's that book question. And I seem to have a problem with bringing up the question. So, what's a book that you have read that you want to talk about? And I think you have a few books that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I told you there's a few. We can talk about this one, quite old book
Mhm.
from '88, from Richard Sandler, called Maverick, and then we can talk about this.
I
Okay, you
can
have it.
bring
All right,
that
cool.
one on the screen. Well, we'll talk book by book. So let's start with Maverick. What do you like about the book? Because if you bring it up, I think it's more than 10 years old. It's maybe even older.
Yeah.
I have it somewhere here also. I like it. What do you like about that book?
I think because, first of all, you need to recognize the context in which this, not even book was written, but in which Ricardo was handling the change in the company, right? So he was a son of a quite wealthy businessman in Brazil, right? And as typically it goes, right? So then the wealthy businessmen want to have a successor of the business. Typically, back then, it shall be male, right? So
Unfortunately, yes.
yeah, even though he might have more kids, I don't know exactly how many, but they would pick. Let's say he picked Ricardo as the successor, and then what have happened, right? So Ricardo enters the business, and he was in his 20s, right? So he didn't see probably any other big businesses before, and didn't know how things could be different. And this is also very similar how Google founders built Google. They also build a big company, not even knowing how it can be different, because they only came from university and then been trying to replicate university in a company. That's how Google became a successful, because it was something different, right? So, but Ricardo, like he came, based what he wrote in the book and how he talks about this in interviews, that when he enters the job site, it was like a marine pumps, some kind of industrial like warehouse complex where they building pumps. And he saw like people just coming to work 9 to 5 and no motivation, no energy, like, you just come to get your paycheck pretty much. And he said, like, okay, can it be different, right? You just ask yourself a question, can it be in a way where people love the jobs they do and can come to with excitement, with energy, and then put this energy into the business? Because for him, I think what he cared about, he didn't care about, soft stuff. I mean, I think he did care about people on the personal level, but from business point of view, for him, it's like what? Making money, right? And then he managed to prove that you can combine, and back then, like in '80s, it was like bizarre to even think about this, right? So he could combine making money, growing the company, with the entirely radical way of doing business, where people have more control. They open salaries in 89 or 91 or something like that, right? It's just like, again, bizarre. So now when you think about those steel companies and Zappos and like similar who open up their salaries, now it's like, it's like 21st century is kind of a little bit makes sense, even though some other folks have troubles embracing even the idea. But doing this in 80s, 90s, where communism was still doing quite okay in 88, right? So like falling down, but still, it was kind of like a bizarre idea, and he managed to pull it off, right? And in his book he talks about the entire process of how did he come to this idea, because it all starts with a question, like in similar examples that I told you, like, okay, there is something that's broken, how can you fix it? Right? And like you keep on answering the question, and you come down to the point of how can we engage people into making decisions, because it's people who is doing the actual job, who is knowing how to make things faster, more efficient. And now come back to our age of knowledge workers and wisdom, as he likes to say. All right, so think of it if you have a developer who is producing code, writing code every day, and company is faced with the option to choose AWS or GCP, who will be making a decision? Typically, it will be like CTO, CIO, CEO looking at the P&Ls and what is cheaper, what is more expensive, and based on that, make a decision. But is it the only measure you make a decision on this? Really? Are you not considering engineering productivity and speed of a development and vendor locking and scalability, reliability, and there are so many other technical terms that needs to be accounted for, which not all CTOs, I can tell you, even know about. Because most of those CTOs coming from classical enterprise mainframe backgrounds, they don't even know what cloud is. I mean, maybe now they know the term, but they don't know the actual details, what it means to build CI/CD pipelines, what it means to build reliable systems, what it means to what is Kafka brokers and all this new cool tech, or Pulsar or wherever. So they don't know details. But how can you make company level decision if you don't understand nuts and bolts, right? So
and if I remember correct, I don't know if it's in the book or if I heard Ricardo talk about it. He was actually, his father was almost the complete opposite. His father was really a very authoritarian person that led the company as I wouldn't say dictator, because I think that's way too strong, but he really had like the typical boss at that time. I make the decisions. And I think I heard Ricardo say like he was already in that company, and at some point he said to his father, well, if you keep pushing things to me that way, I'm out. And then his father, as a kind of way to get his successor on board, said, okay, then I give you more rights on some of that stuff. And Ricardo, because of the fights with his father, said, this is not the kind of boss that I like, so maybe this is also not the kind of boss that other people like. And he did the opposite, which was in a culture, because I think that's really important to stress. It's not that he started a company just like that. He turned a company that was completely having a different kind of culture into that more open company. That's which is even harder. And I've never been to Brazil, so I don't know enough about that culture, but it doesn't sound to me like a culture that is typical in Brazil. So I think that's also another stress point. And like you say, it was in the 80s and the 90s, because I don't know the exact date, but I think the book was from the early 90s, before 95 or 96.
No,
because I remember
book was written in 88, I think, first version. There was multiple prints, but I think the first one was in 88. But then you also need to recognize that he wrote the book based on something. So that's been happening in beginning of 80s, right?
Exactly. So yeah, that's incredible. And indeed, it's a book that, like, in that sense, it's more than 20 years old, and lots of, well, I would say 10, 15 years ago, it was very popular. A lot of people talked about it, but I think, and this is why I like that you bring that book up, because so many people forgot about it, and so little companies are experimenting with these kind of styles.
Because not all companies need it, and not, as I told you, not all people who run those companies are yet ready for this book.
Well, I'm not sure that Samler was ready for it either, but yeah, that's a different
because now we can go talking about what it takes to lose control, and how it is losing the control, right? Especially like imagine like yourself being a business owner, so you have like your own savings and you start a company, you build a startup, and then like Ricardo or some other agile coach comes to you and says, "Hey, look, I mean, open up your salaries and give control to your people." Would you do it? It's a tough question, right? So,
yes, and it's I think many people will suffer. Well, it's the same kind of struggles we sometimes have in a relationship. To what level do we have control to our partners, to our children, about certain things? So yeah, it's what kind of control. And indeed, when you go to a company, you have even a less emotional bond with the people that you're giving much more control over. So that brings that other kind of thing. So thanks for bringing that up, because, and like I really like what you stress at the end. It's like, it's not every company might be ready for it, and not every company might need it, and that's fine as well. But it's a nice counterbalance to some of the major things that we're seeing right now, I would say. So thanks for bringing that up, and it's a good inspiration.
Yes.
What does that? Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to finish. The key point Ricardo want to make, that it is possible to operate company like this. That's
Right.
And the moment he learned how to do it, he stopped and started doing something else. Now he's doing education and some investment and some institutes. Yeah, so teaching executives to do it, and also building school for primary grades to like educate children to live like and study in kind of totally different way, right? So this is what inspires him.
And in a sense, he kind of replicates the system in the sense that he didn't just do it in one company. He's leading all his initiatives in a similar kind of way. Of course, not exactly the same, because he has grown and learned over the time, but being an example for that in that sense.
Yeah. So
okay, go ahead.
No, just want to say, like, when people tell me, Andrii, it's impossible, it's like utopian idea, there is a plenty of cases to show it is possible. It just takes a will and dedication, resilience to do it. But yeah, some people not yet ready.
The phrase "it's not possible" I always translate it to you or we together. We don't know how to do it, and that it's in many cases is true. But let's figure it out together, because I do believe, just like you, that it might be possible, and there are examples that have shown that. So thanks for that. Let's talk about that next book. You wanted to bring up a next.
Yeah, the other one that also I read it like maybe a few years ago, called The Core by Aki Hintsa. So he is a Finnish surgeon. So he is a Finnish surgeon, and he was coaching Formula One race drivers. Together with lots of executives and business people and also and owners. And the reason I brought him up, and again, there are multiple books like this been written, right? I brought him up because he worked with the Formula One drivers, and that type of career can be quite demanding, because if you follow Hamilton and other folks, right? So their not the regime, but how you say, the schedule is quite intense, right? So when you start the season, you go like the entire 9 months, you're in constant focus. Okay. And you need to deliver on a really high speed, right? Like 300 kilometers per hour, if not more, right? So depends on the track and how they ride.
So you have to take decisions in split seconds, basically.
In milliseconds. Like you need to follow, not even your gut, you need to follow your intuition, right? You need to tap into your unconscious if you want to perform on that level or this type of speeds. They need to fly over continents. You need to, you have jet lag, you have you're sitting a lot in this cockpit or how it's called, right? So when you drive, so you have like all the same issues we have as a software engineer, so like our professionals in our industry, all the same issues. We also travel, I mean, at least we used to travel before COVID, now we travel less, but this very similar set of challenges that Formula One drivers face as many people in our industry, especially like imagine working in a scale up or a startup who is growing at speed. There's also like lots of comparison between Formula One sometimes as well. I think Henrik Niebert like to do it as well. So, and what Anki he was talking about, right? So there's also nice history to read about his doctor's career. He was in Africa and trying to build medical system in, I don't remember what country it was, Kenya or Nigeria. I don't remember. I just need to check in the book once again. But he was kind of trying to replicate the Finnish model into Africa. It didn't work really well. So because again, culture differences and how people work and make decisions totally different. But he had some successes, right? And it's actually interesting to see how he developed his system to maintain his sanity, to maintain his physical activity, his what he talks about, his core, like the core idea of multiple components in your life to make it holistic. So when one area of your life suffers, then the other areas will suffer ultimately as well, right? It needs to be a system, right? And then he takes that system and apply it to any field where it is like you make your career as a engineer or executive or race driver or wherever. So you need to maintain your your nutrition, your physical activity, your mental well-being, your some kind of existential questions needs to be answered, because when you operate under pressure, your brain starts doing very strange things, right? So, and when you still need to make decisions in a split second, and if you make a mistake in that decision, you can lose your life in Formula One, right?
And lives of others as well. So
Yes.
it's not just your life.
Yeah. So that's why all your decisions needs to be intuitive, automatic. So wherever you decide is the right decision, if you make a mistake, you need to correct that very quickly in another split second. Make another decision which will correct the mistake in the previous decision, and that build up as a system. It's not only you as a race driver. There are hundreds of thousands of people involved to support you as a driver. So imagine you like writing code, like a MO programming session. You're writing code. You are a driver, and you have like 1,000 people around you doing API monitoring, profiling, performance analysis, telemetry, data, massaging, controlling, all of that, right? But you write code right now. You have access to entire system. You have sudo, right? You have admin access to entire systems. You are the driver, and all people around you are supporting. And now you rotate. Now somebody else is the driver, right? And then you have the similar dynamic. That's how I think about programming in this sense, right? So when you write code, you don't do it for yourself alone. You do it in a system, but you need to understand how those other components work to be efficient and productive and maintain the flow. Because if you make a mistake, it can, break down the entire flow. But then also you talk about the fault tolerance of a system, how to reduce the human factor, how to make system self-healing. There's plenty of engineering practices we use, of course, to minimize an effect of human error. But it's a different book, so talk about human factor and human error. So let's finish over here for now.
But I like it because you bring up all these different kind of things that are having an impact. And indeed, we as developers, we have much more time than a split second or split millisecond, and we impact lives of others in whatever software we're creating. Spotify, it might just look okay. This is for fun in a way, for recreation, but sometimes people are writing software for, I don't know, pacemakers or for nuclear plants or for drones that are using in whatever way. So that have a lot of impact. And so I think it's important to really understand some of how we humans work and how we make decisions, because that's a little bit what I'm hearing also about that book. I haven't read it.
In some cases, it can also be split-second decisions. Imagine you have a production incident.
Oh, right.
I need to fix it now. What will you do? And that's a split-second decision, right? Because you need to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. Same like because he works as a surgeon. That's what he speaks about, right? So
yeah.
Because imagine you have ER situation, emergency situation, and you need to save somebody's life. If you are not in control as a surgeon, you won't be able to help anyone else. Help yourself first before you help others.
Yeah, and if you, I don't know what he writes. Again, I haven't read the book, but I've heard also about surgeons in some situations that have been operating or been working for an enormous amount of days, not enough sleep.
Yeah.
If you know how our body works, and it's like this is sometimes insane because they make very important decisions sometimes on not of sleep. And if I just look at, I've done recently some recently, I think already a year or two ago, I was using some kind of app with some kind of brain puzzles and whatever. And then at a certain day, so I did it on a daily basis. I was kind of okay. I don't know, a certain level. And then a certain day, my level was like awful. It was really bad. It was like, what happened? Then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I only slept 1 or 2 hours, but I felt like, okay, I'm tired, but I feel like I'm still capable of thinking. But that app told me like, no, if you're not, you're actually doing really bad at and making decisions and it was just brain puzzles. So, but imagine that this is indeed for life-saving procedures. That was really the moment that I felt like, okay, sleep is, I can think that I feel okay. I'm a little bit tired, but I think I feel okay. I'm not. I need much more sleep. So that's the kind of thing I learned about myself. So I'm looking forward to reading the book because it sounds like a very interesting thing. I'm always interested in these kind of, I would say it's interesting from an agile point of view, and it has nothing to do with it, and it has everything to do with it. So these are the kind of things I'm really interested in. I want to move to that next question. For me, one of the nicest questions to learn about. What's a question do you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Yeah, I've been thinking of that in agile context. I think one provocative question I typically ask people is why agile became a Kaggle cult, whether you agree with this or not.
So if you think about that for yourself, what would be your answer to that?
I think there is no like one kind of black or white kind of answer. I think it kind of this depends kind of answer, right? Because I saw multiple teams and companies where those, I would say, principles applied well and they did work well, right? And it's all about down to how you can make informed decision in your context, which helps you from day one, not like hypothetical. Maybe it will help you in a month or two when you finish your agile transformation, maybe in 5 years from now. Typical, agile consultant would sell to kind of big company like a bank or enterprise type of company. So I think the problem begins when people don't get quick results from whatever idea. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be agile, but CI/CD, like DevOps movement, or product development, or design thinking, or design studios, design sprints, whatever the Google invented. So like, I think the key idea when you try to make a change, what will make a difference if you can show quick results in a quick way, but also quick results which won't jeopardize the entire system when change management stops. Because typically, like, you would see, like, example, consultant comes, make like a small project, executives see, oh, okay, huge success, now let's do like a big revamp of entire organization and move into safe or less or whatever they want to do, right? Or scale another scale agile framework. And I actually never saw any example where this big brush implementation became successful. It eventually kind of moves into migration, and over 5 years it kind of becomes a different organization. Then people claim that, okay, now in the big scheme of things, economically, it is a success. But the other question I would ask, okay, if you won't do the same transformation, would it be still success, yes or no? And typically people say, we don't know, maybe. Like, yeah, okay, what's the point investing hundreds, thousands, or millions of budgets into what might not even work out, and then kind of follow specific prescribed methodology to do what not always makes sense for people to do, right? So, like, instead of being context specific and context aware, by working solving specific challenges that people in the field face day by day, and then work one challenge after another, they invent these big certifications and educational courses, try to change the mindset of people who work in this field for 20, 30 years. Look, you can't change people like this. I mean, people are not changed in a day. I mean, I know, like, people say, like, hey, like, change can happen overnight. You just wake up and magically you feel differently. Yes, maybe. But down on the field, in the team, on the organization, compoundingly, nothing will change. I mean, some will be the same at the end, right? Change takes time, and it takes cultivation, and that is being grown through people who are actually doing the work, and that more power to the people. I think that's probably, if I would kind of sum up, the what happened to Agile. I think people who wanted to make money, they did make a lot of money on it by selling courses and certifications and stuff. Some people became famous. I mean, it's okay, it's normal. It happens in any industry. It's normal, right? So, but then the question is, what value we create in the world, and can we do this value in a different way, orthogonal, right, to what been already tried, and do it quicker, do it more efficient, and give more power to people who are actually doing the work. So people who decide, they become more like enablement to change, rather than active drivers of change to budget or different regulations mechanism. Again, I don't know how, like, good answer of this myself, and it maybe feels like rambling, but I think my main concern is that Agile had very good start, and like this kind of romantic aspiration that, hey, we're here to make something nice, but it eventually became like same certification and stuff as any other industry. So,
For me, the short version of the answer is something similar to what Jerry Weinberg said, is that the wider you spread it, the thinner it gets. And at some point, if it becomes very popular, yeah, there will be a lot of people who don't understand it fully and then make money or whatever you put out of that. I want to add a little thing. You said something earlier on about companies taking a while. What I feel that many people forget is that, well, there's people who are really fond of the Spotify model. And for me, that model existed after, what is it, 6 or 7 years of working and keep improving. And so it took Spotify at least 6 or 7 years to get there. And it's insane to think that a company that has a lot of background can just swap instantly based on another process that is built for a product, for a company that has totally nothing to do with their thing. Yeah, if someone like Spotify that started right from the scratch with a lot of emphasis on certain culture takes that long, then it won't go faster with many other companies, I think. You've been
Yeah,
there, so do you have any?
Spotify is a different case, right? So Spotify
Mm.
didn't invent a model; it wasn't even a model.
No, I know.
It was like a way how we did stuff back then. And I think first of all, when Anders sat down creating that picture with tribes and chapters and stuff, it's not even how it worked. I mean, he just tried to make a sense what was going on, because it was chaotic startup, growing, hiring more people, trying to make a sense how to organize those teams into different sub teams and whatever, how to make it work. And back then it was like I wasn't in the company yet at the time when this so-called model was created, but I spoke to Anders and to Henrik about this a lot, and they said, like, look, I mean, we just tried to make a sense of the mess. That's all. And,
Yeah, it was a kind of explaining, which is partly what we're doing, partly where we're going. And it was what Henrik said to me, something was like, this is just a picture of time. And by the time it was published, it was already completely different. And so that people just sticking to that one version, as I heard somebody talk about uh, internally in Spotify, people talk about the Spotify model 2012 instead of the model, even if today I would think people would even say there is no model, and that's never there. But if there was at some point, it was a 2012 or 2013 version, where 10 years later that company is completely different. But I wanted to stress more that this was the result of a lot of work. And like you say, it was still chaos. We're still trying to figure out. Let's face it, in many companies there are. And that actually probably was part of the success. The more it became structure, and you need structure at some level for if you're growing beyond so many thousand people. But yeah, depending on how do you look at structure, I think that's because the more structure it becomes, the more you come into your cargo cult, where you're saying we do stuff because of doing stuff and not because of, yeah, does it bring value?
yeah, because I mean, in most cases, it became like, oh, this company is doing agile. We also need to do agile because that company doing more in revenues than we are. That's what it comes down to. Because again, don't forget owners and business owners and board level decision making, because that's how they make decisions, right? So, and I've been in some of those discussions. I saw how people making those decisions. It comes down to this, like, oh, we have our market share reduced this year because of this competitor. This competitor is doing agile. Okay, now we need to do agile as well. And that's how they make a decision to convert entire company into agile. And this is just ridiculous.
I think it was Jürgen Appelo who said it at some point, or a big competitor has a large light sign on top of their building, so that makes them successful. Let's also add a large light sign on our building. Wait a minute. Why? That doesn't have any influence on your process, and it might give you brand recognition. That's another kind of thing. But if it's about the way we work, probably that light sign on top of your building doesn't have influence on the process and everything. So thanks for bringing it up, because indeed I think we need to think and keep thinking about what is it that agile brings, what is the cargo cult, because in the beginning cargo cult was kind of used a lot for non-agile things, but today I think there is a lot of cargo cult that people don't always understand it, and then they don't like certain rituals, but actually they're not doing even the rituals. They don't understand it. It's just mimicking some of that without understanding.
Yeah, I think
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, I think what it comes down to, again, it's who produces the value in this company.
Right.
So if you talk about tech products, the person who does designs, the person who writes code, those are people who and does data massaging and all other things, right? So those people are producing the actual value. So the company needs to build around them so they can produce value which more efficient, but also value which solves the actual problem, kind of generates the new value. And then all the mechanisms like finance, corporate finance, marketing, sales, customer support or customer success, accounting, administration, all those supporting mechanisms are built around the value creation. Because let's face it, I mean, if you remove marketing, you remove sales, yeah, people will say like, yeah, you won't be able to sell the product. I was like, yeah, maybe you will. You will sell some product, maybe not as fast, not as quickly, but if you have a good product, the customer will find you one way or another. Worst case, you can always do digital ads, advertisement, and pay $50 per lead. If you have,
which is again some marketing and some sales and whatever. But yeah, I would put it more the opposite, and at the same time the same, is that if you don't have the product, then any marketing or sales won't help you at some level. You need to have some kind of product. If I remember correctly, you had you had a tagline at some point that you said it's people, product, tech in that order. It's really that. I think that is important. We need to have the product, and we need to do these kind of things. I want to move to that next question, that last question. Who do you think I should ask next?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to follow. I mean, it depends which direction you want to go. If you want to go into like a Sweden, Spotify, Agile, Circle. I know if you talk to Henrik already, you can talk to Henrik. You can talk to Anders Ivarsson. So they are two folks who kind of tried to structure the mess years ago. You can talk to Cliff as well. He's one of the Agile coaches. I mean, by the way, I know I work as Agile.
I think this is the Cliff that you're talking about. Huh?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, flight levels, exactly. Yes.
That's I don't want to have too many people of Spotify because I had already a few, and indeed, it's this is not about who's Agile at Spotify, but at the same time, this is where some of the interesting stuff happened in the last couple of years. With many people did great stuff, so these are really indeed good people to invite. You said if you want to go in this direction or another, what could be another direction I could go into?
I mean, again, because for me, kind of Agile movement is kind of fading out, right? So I see it's already went through the now it's laggers who is entering the Agile. So like somebody who like banks, like the big corporations who never thought of this, now they have to because everyone is doing this. So kind of in terms of like innovation curve, it became like a pop business, right? So Agile is not fun anymore. You just keep doing what you did, and maybe learning, like entering other domains, other spaces in beyond budgeting, in finance or in Agile marketing or Agile, how to do sales differently, how to build product differently, right? So and there are plenty of people in each of those domains who are embracing similar ideas, what folks in software engineering did 22 years ago, inventing the Agile manifesto and principles. So all this now comes to other domains or functions or skills, right? How you want to phrase it. And given the economical instability we're going through right now, with the change of political powers, macroeconomical shifts, there will be more need for new ways of doing things in a more efficient way, in quicker way. And this process won't be limited to building software alone. Because if you want to build a new company ground up, just relying on quick iteration is not enough. I can tell you, right? You can build. I can build an app for you in no-code tool within a day. Okay, will I make money on it? Less likely, right? So will I be able to pay salary even for myself? Less likely. So you need to have sales, you need to have marketing, you need to have brand identity, you need to have positioning, and all that. Again, if you look into each of that area specifically, all of them are quite archaic waterfall-like systems. Okay, so they also have like I define my let's speak brand identity, right? So you need to define my brand, my kind of identity schema, my language, my ICP, ideal customer profile, other things, and then eventually in 2 months I will create a digital advertisement for you to run your ads campaign. That's how the people, some, not all of them, but some people in marketing think, right? So, and I typically challenge them and say, okay, no, you have 5 hours, go figure out, come back to me with a plan. How you're going to run digital advertisement in a quick, not agile, but let's say in a quick, professional, flexible way, so we can keep building on top of it as we learn more about our target audience, right?
I like that, because indeed like you said, and I like that you mentioned beyond budgeting. In the book version, I had indeed at some point Bjarte invited, so that might be a good idea indeed to ask around as well, because these are one of the multiple places where we're moving into agility, or more with some of the mindsets. And what you said about agile, I agree and I disagree at the same time. I think there's still a lot of things there, but I do agree that it's been a lot of cargo cultures with a lot of ways that people are doing it for the wrong kind of reasons. And in that sense, it's fading. That I fully agree there as well. So but it's some of these ideas that need to spread out in other parts of business, and there is still a lot to learn there as well, I would say. Well, I want to thank you for your time, because we've been talking for, I think, a little bit over 2 hours right now. It's been a wonderful time, and unfortunately, my camera is again off. But I want to ask you, if people want to reach out and connect to you, what could be a good way for people to connect to you?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn for now, unless some better option comes around. But for now, it's LinkedIn. Yes.
And I think that is the correct link to your LinkedIn at this point.
That
is correct.
That's the one. Yes.
Well, I want to really thank you for your time. I hope my camera will come up just before we end up this conversation. Yes, I really want to thank you for your time, because it's been a wonderful conversation. That for once, the challenges are on my side. Typically, sometimes I had challenges with connections from others. I've recently changed. Added a window to my office to keep the noise out, but that means that it's getting a lot hotter in here. So I need to figure out how to deal with that. Anyway, that is my challenge. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot. We went very deep into very serious topics like the war, but also like, okay, how do we get out of that mess that sometimes we are into that agile space? Some solutions, I would say, or some ideas of where we can go. But it's been wonderful also to learn about you and your mind view on some things. I also like that you keep challenging, I would say, both me and the community in many different ways. I think, and like you said earlier on, you want to fix stuff, so you want to really grab things and see how you can make the world better. That would be my words of saying that. And I see you do it in this conversation. I see you do it in many different ways of how you interact with the people around you. So thank you very much for that time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my problem is that I sometimes want to do it too quickly. Then that's the world or people might be ready for it. But that's some of my personality that I'm learning to embrace and also work with as well. So, thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
I think we need people who keep pushing and who want it faster. And indeed, sometimes we need to look at, okay, in some companies, I think it takes some of the things I said. Sometimes in companies, it takes a few generations of coaches, 4 or 5 people saying the exact same thing. I think in the world, it's the same thing. We need more people trying to embrace it and having the energy. And at some point, we lose an energy for a company, and then somebody else takes over, or the company loses energy in us because they're tired of hearing. They bring someone else in, and that person says the exact same thing, and after 3 or 4 people they start to learn. And if it's coaches or I personally don't mind about the title. I think both of us were no longer using title as agile coach. more, and okay, how can we have impact on the company independent of the role and whatever there is there. I think
Yeah.
it's,
It needs to bring results. I mean, it doesn't bring results, and something is wrong. So yeah.
exactly, and that's, for me, that's leadership in whatever you call it. It's independent of a name, because that's another part that sometimes disturbs me, that some people pay much more attention to a name, to the results that we got inside our companies or inside the world. But that's been a wonderful conversation about these things. So thank you very much for that time. And yeah, we'll keep in touch. If it's been wonderful every time I'm talking to people in Stockholm, in the whole concept. And at the same time, it's incredible how resilient the people are from Ukraine. With what your stories, some of the others that I'm hearing. So thanks for bringing that up and showing that part of what I would say the ugly part of the world, making it a little bit more the human aspect of it, because that's also important of these ugliest things.
Yeah, I mean, that's life, yin yang again. Where is the light, there is a dark, and vice versa. So that's who we are as humans. We need to embrace it and live with this. And the sooner we realize, the sooner we can figure out the mechanism of how to work with this and convert negatives into positives and keep negatives under control. So they need to exist, they need to be there. But the question is what effect they have on us and other people in the world. So yeah, if each of us start to embrace our own nature and then teach others how to do it in their own ways, then maybe the world gets a bit better. So keep on pushing.
Yeah, and like you say, we need to show it to the people, the ugliness, because if we don't see it, we can't react to that. And I think that's what I like so much about this whole conversation. You bring it up, you show the visual part in the sense about visualizing the ugliness, but without really a blaming part. It's really like, okay, that is part there, and okay, how can we deal with that? And that's the energy that I like so much here. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you too. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.